This is episode 2 of Food for Consciousness with Caroline Stevens and Holly Page. Hello, Holly. It seems like no time at all since you were here last.
I know, it's great to be back, thank you.
It's a bit chillier today, though, isn't it?
We're wrapped up a bit warmer, aren't we?
So, how did we leave the last show? I remember you were making something. You were liquidizing. Was it NutriBullet?
In a NutriBullet. I was blending chocolate pudding, and I'd forgotten to bring the chocolate powder in, so we were eating it without the chocolate powder. And I have to report, I added some chocolate powder afterwards, and it was very, very yummy. But I'm glad you liked it without it.
Yes.
People generally do.
And
it's such a simple recipe. It's just a simple combination. So, and we're going to talk about some other things today, but, in the book, in my Food for Conscious book, I've got over 100 recipes. And I made those up at a time when I was first raw and missing cooked food, to be honest. And I was really impassioned to make all these recipes up to make up for the foods I was missing. And then I, had the sense to write down the exact amounts that went.
Yes, because I noticed there's some recipes at the back.
And they're handy because they give you exact amounts so you can make something that's going to work, And when if you get into this and you get the hang of it, you don't need recipes anymore, because what happens is, as you rebuild and refire up your neural system, because you're rebuilding your neural system with the raw fats, you're rebuilding the neurotransmitter levels with the amino acids, but also the powerful compounds in all this plant food you're eating.
Because part of your brain is made from
the neurotransmitters
fats.
Are made from amino acids. The structure is made from fats. But also to get the neurotransmitter level, levels high, this is where there's so many there's compounds in plant food and particularly in fruits that will keep our neurotransmitter activity high, and that's how we're designed to live.
So we were talking about, before we came on air, we were talking about how man used to live. We would be living in huts in years gone by.
Or, who knows? We're talking way back. We don't really know, except that if we're in our natural environment, we didn't need a lot of insulation from the natural environment. So we were living in connection with the natural environment, eating a natural diet. And,
we'd still have the shelter, but the floor...
possibly, we're still got to say, isn't it? Because you're living in a warm environment, possibly, animals do build shelters. We don't know exactly what type of shelter, but not not insulated completely from the natural environment. So still, able to hear the natural sounds, still electrically connected to the earth, because, a mud floor is electrically connected to the earth, but this isn't.
Of course, in some places like Bali, most of their house is actually still fairly exposed, isn't it?
Exactly.
So they live with nature.
They're still living in connection with the natural world. So it's a very different experience of life. So, we're living, in this kind of climate, Britain, it's difficult, but this is why, it's ideal to walk barefoot and to spend time out of doors. But, because we spend most of our time indoors, this is why various devices have been contrived to help us keep the electrical connection with the earth. For example, this is an earthing pad, which I'm sitting on. So, it's not quite the same.
Can I just feel that? So, when you say an earthing pad...
So it's got silver wires going through it.
Silver wires, okay.
And it goes through to a connecting point here, and then actually that goes through to the earthing connection in the socket. So it goes down through the electrical system of the house into the ground to connect, because the earth is so-called negatively charged, right? That's just the scientific convention, that description. It's electron rich, and so we're designed to live in because we always did, to live in connection with that, so to be continually charged up from the earth. And you take that away,
right?
It's a bit like plugging a laptop and wondering why after a day it doesn't really work anymore. So people find that there's a book called Earthing by Clint Ober where he documents a lot of this, and there's various documentaries made. But basically, a lot of conditions can be helped just by putting that connection back again. It's like years ago when they discovered the many benefits of water, the body's many cries for water it was called, and all these ailments could just be solved by just drinking more water.
Lots of water.
And it's a bit like that with earthing. It's a general thing. It's so simple. It's what we're meant to do.
It's like the body being a battery, and it needs being topped up.
It needs to be charged, And there's more to it than that, because, if we're, our neural systems are electrical, and so it stands to reason that we're going to have different kinds of thoughts if we're in electrical connection to the earth than if we're in electrical connection to the so-called positively charged artificial environment. Because the artificial environment is oppositely charged to the Earth, and also, of course, we've got the mains frequencies, which aren't the ideal for us to live in. So it will change our thoughts.
Right, because I was interviewing Mark Steele from 5G a few weeks ago. He was talking about phased arrays. So, you know, we've got all these rays surrounding us, so this is going to have a negative impact on us, isn't it?
Of course, it gets more and more extreme, you know. So, but this isn't something new. We've insulated. It's just got more extreme. We've insulated ourselves from the Earth for quite a while now.
Well, we've got carpets.
We've cut ourselves off from the natural world, and that means it's a subtle thing, but this means cutting ourselves off from the natural mind. It affects our minds. It affects the way we use our imaginations.
So we've shut parts of our brain down effectively.
The thing is, our minds aren't really. This is the interesting thing, which I've been sort of recently, actually since writing that book, I've started to sort of develop a different context on it. Really, I'm writing another book, but it's not really new information, but just a new way of packaging it. And you see, before I was talking about nutrition to build the mind and earthing to improve our minds, but the point is to make it more than about our minds. What a lonely experience just to live in our minds. We want to connect beyond that. So the idea is to connect up to the mind of nature and the body of nature through these practices. So if you're eating raw food, you're connecting directly. You're keeping the patterning, the structure of the plant intact.
And this should give us positive thinking, because obviously, I mean, now we live in such a fast-filled environment where people are working so many hours, and you know, mental health is at.
Mental health it's
such a big issue, isn't it?
There's figures have changed. The statistics about mental health issues have changed radically. You know, we know.
Is it 1 in 3 people now will suffer?
I thought it was supposed to be 1 in 2. Who knows? I mean, maybe 100%. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Yes, because most people would never admit.
No, but I mean, everybody's rattled, aren't they? Let's admit it. So, and you know, if you look at the work of Tony, which, you know, Tony Wright, and you look at, you know, and look at the split brain and what's going on there, what we consider as normal human behaviour is pretty mad, really, you know. But there's part of us, it's not all of us, part of us has still got that connection to sanity and well-being, and part of us hasn't, with split personalities. So the idea then is to cultivate the bit of us that still does have that connection. We're not one thing or another, you know. So
we need to be well-balanced people, don't we?
Yes, and that's a tricky, you know, what we're balancing. When we say well-balanced, what are we actually balancing? What, you know, that's an interesting question.
Yes, I mean, because our lives are so frenetic for most of us.
Yeah.
And we miss things, don't we? We miss things, we miss out on.
Yeah. And I would say, you know, it's natural for us to desire connection. So if we're not exposing ourselves to the starry sky, and we're not connecting to the electricity of the earth, and we're not eating natural foods and being in nature, we're going to connect to something else. And this is where the problems come in. You know, people feel that they're victims. Because of course we don't want to live in isolation, so we will connect. So if we can't see the starry sky, we'll connect to the computer. You know, do you see what I mean? And then we feel all these forces. Sometimes people feel all these forces are controlling their lives. And
well, there's no doubt about it. I mean, if you use the internet for any length of time, especially using social media platforms, people feel 10 times worse when they come off.
I think that's known now, that it brings mood down, it makes people unhappy. So there's nothing wrong with using these things judiciously with intent. I'm now going to do this and it serves a purpose, you know. I'm going to message somebody, or I'm going to look up a train time. That's useful, but we mustn't be swallowed whole by them. If we're going to be swallowed whole by something, let's be swallowed whole by the benign forces of nature, by the life force, or whatever you choose to call it. Do you see what I mean? And we will be swallowed whole one day by that when we die. Do you know what I mean? And that's not such a bad thing, but it's been swallowed whole by these. I mean, this has been a bit deep, isn't it? But I think a lot of the problem that you get on all these worries about being controlled by all these forces is because you're not immersing ourselves in the forces of nature, and that's my really deeply held opinion.
Well, I think people feeling that they're out of control, that they're not in control of their lives.
In a way, it's not so wrong to be out of control, because we're not in control of everything, because that would be weird.
True.
There's names for that kind of thing, but it's been controlled by the wrong forces. You know, of course we can't control how we're born or how we die, or most of our lives we control little bits of it. We control our responses to things and we set intentions, but do we control our desires? Do we decide what we desire? No, we just feel a desire. But if we're connected to nature, and there's so many ways, you know, through the earthing or the way we eat or connecting our imagination, observing nature and seeing the beauty of it and connecting our imaginations to it, then our desires will be healthy desires. And when we fulfill those desires, we will feel nourished and happy by.
And we'll be more creative.
Yeah, exactly. Connecting to natural creativity. So that's why I came to see the whole point of, you know, this building a neural system and the earthing was actually to connect to a mind bigger than our own, but the natural mind, you know, the mind of nature, not sort of plugging into all these other systems which people are so upset by. You know, without going into it in detail, I mean, a lot of people get very upset about government, about authority, and I understand that. I understand why, but I see the solution really is to connect to a bigger. There's nothing stronger than the life force.
So on top of this, I mean, you recommend one of these mats?
Oh God, yeah. I mean, the thing is, of course, it's not a substitute for spending time outside, seeing the beauty of nature. But the simple fact is, for most of us, we're not doing that most of the time. And you know, I'm sitting on this now, not just to show you it. It's because I feel more comfortable. I can relax. Whereas before I had these kinds of devices, I'd just be kind of trying to run away.
I have to admit, I did once do a holiday in the outback of Australia.
Yeah.
One of these events where you can spend 3 days in the outback. You use natural toilets, and you are literally see the stars all night. And it's fantastic experience.
Yeah. And you're talking about the balance, and we are in a situation realistically where we have to balance two worlds, and you know, and because that's what we're in. So you know, this is a way of bringing that balance in, so we can deal. We don't have to run away forever. We can deal with what we've got to deal with here, but we've got this connection. While we've got this connection to sanity while we do it, you know, and you know, for me, eating, say, you know, a bowl of that chocolate pudding, I immediately start to feel that sort of that good energy again. It's not a stimulating energy; it's a good energy. You know, this is sort of feels like safety, and it's keeping that connection. You know, because it doesn't mean that life's good all the time or it doesn't present challenges, but it just means it's this feeling that you're held in that.
Presumably, though, you are more attuned to being able to deal with difficulties.
Exactly.
Because you're on an even keel, aren't you?
Yeah, and you've got connection to a mind that's bigger than your own. And you could say it's the, you know, the mind of the earth, and beyond that to wherever your belief system is. You know, I don't want to bring too much of that into it, because I think, you know, people feel very differently about these things, and I'm here to talk about practical things, what people experience by doing those things. I don't really want to tell people what they should be experiencing, but I just want people to know about these practical options and how big difference they could make.
Yes, because I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? We have these various agendas like Agenda 2021, and the forecast is that more and more people are going to be living in cities, and they're going to suffer more discomfort. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
It doesn't suit everybody to be living literally on top of each other.
No.
Whereas years gone by, a lot more people proportionately lived in the countryside.
Yeah.
So you can see why we're suffering.
Yeah.
You know, health-wise.
I mean, I would find it, you know, I don't believe it's good for anybody to live in a city, but there might be reasons why people feel a need to at some part of their life, and you know, who are we to say why some people have to do what they have to do?
It's becoming so cost prohibitive sometimes to live in the country, and it's also the transportation costs, isn't it?
I mean, there's all kinds of circumstances. So it's, you know, we're in whatever we're in. There are things that we can do to help that can take us more towards where we need to go. You know, and I think for me that it's that finding that sense of connection to that the life force really. Even when we seem to be sort of being taken away from it. And, you know, of course, the issues with the EMFs, you know, that's a huge thing. We'll touch on that, actually, because
EMF?
All the electromagnetic electromagnetic frequencies. You see, we've already got a situation where because of what's happened to us, our pineal glands are not pumping enough melatonin. But what happens at night when it goes dark, that should be a message to the pineal gland to start pumping some extra melatonin for the night, to help us sleep. Melatonin helps us regulate with circadian rhythms. But if you've got these
With what rhythms?
circadian rhythms, the natural rhythms, day and night, and
Yes,
so
because a lot
forth.
more people are now finding it difficult to get to sleep
Yeah.
on a night, aren't
So what
they?
happens is these artificial electromagnetic frequencies, although we can't see them visibly, they go straight through the head. So the inner eye, the pineal gland, is stimulated by them as if it's light, and it reduces the melatonin production.
So we're getting these EMFs from the phased rays?
Well, they're coming from all kinds of places, aren't they? It's all the electronic,
Microwaves,
all kind,
all the
Wi-Fi, mobile, smart TVs, all of it,
yeah.
and it's alien to us.
And of course, more and more people have now got smart meters in their homes.
Yeah.
And there's big health risks.
Yeah, I mean, there is a
Allegedly,
device.
there
I mean, we still need to, it doesn't mean that these things are suddenly all right, but there's a device called the GeoCleanse. Actually, I didn't bring it today, but it's
GeoCleanse.
GeoCleanse. We sell it on our website, Food for Consciousness, and you just put it in a socket, and it does help. It does help protect you from all of that. And I would have brought it today because I like having it with me, but I would have left the rest of the family without it, so I wouldn't do that. I need to get two,
Right.
but I
how
do want
much
to
are
mention
those?
that £116, including the shipping. I'm not here to sell. I'm not really a products
No,
person,
no.
but this is so good, and all the feedback we get is so good.
So this cuts down all the EMFs in your house?
It so-called harmonises them, yeah, and so it doesn't block them, because that's not necessarily a good idea. But it's sort of transform them in a way that doesn't cause a problem for you in the same way anymore. I mean, it's the first time I experienced one. I was in a place in a city, and I just thought, what's going on here? It feels like being in the middle of nature. And then I realised I had the GeoCleanse. And I went to someone's house, same thing. But you can't say it compensates for being in nature, like with anything. But to be honest, it makes some. If before I had one of those, I was, it was situation. I want to run from the house because I'm very sensitive to these things, and now I can just settle down, and do what needs to be done.
And of course, you see so many people are using their computers late on at night,
Yeah.
as well, a stimulation with the television.
Yeah. Well, it's the worst thing to do before you go to sleep, because all the blue light's coming out, and it stimulates you, so you don't get the natural signal to go to sleep. So really, those kind of things should be shut down, at least now before you intend to go to bed, and then just do something else, go for a walk or read, something that will allow you to feel naturally sleepy.
Yeah.
But, supplementing with melatonin, I'm a big fan of that,
So, using one of those earthing mats
Earthing
even.
mat, yeah.
I keep thinking it's about birth. It's almost like you're being reborn, though.
Well, it is, and this is a point I wanted to bring in. And we essentially have two senses of self, because our hemispheres are split, and we're actually carrying. And we are all split personalities, and so it's easier to see in other people.
You mean the left and the right side?
We are all split personalities.
And of course, from the last visit, you said that the left side was the logic,
yeah,
the maths.
but it's actually the damaged side. The right hemisphere can do all of that. It's the changes have caused limitations to the left hemisphere. So the right hemisphere still holds all that function, but it's been suppressed. All the links to all the research are all in the book.
This book.
And you can, there's so much of it. I couldn't talk about it all. If we had forever, I wouldn't have time. But my job is to summarise this, to distill the basic message. But it looks from the evidence that the left hemisphere is a very limited version of the right hemisphere. If we could somehow, come through again, with our DNA read to its full potential, we wouldn't have a split brain. We'd just have a whole functioning head. But right now, we're all split
I never knew
personalities.
that.
So what we do, the left hemisphere isn't a really happy sense of self. It's locked into all its concepts, which aren't necessarily very helpful. But the right hemisphere is the one that's really aware of reality, can connect to reality and can feel, and actually has much more processing power. Only the left hemisphere can't understand music, for example. So it can only talk, whereas the right hemisphere can sing. So I'm talking very simplistic terms, you see what I mean, but using simplistic language to describe this. So we do have a split sense of self. So this is about rebuilding, re-nurturing that sense of self that's much more content in itself, much more connected, and just not isolated. So the things that were really frightening in the left hemisphere sense of self, you know, oh my God, they're not so troublesome, partly because it's easier to think of solutions, and partly because you're not so bothered, because you feel your small
You're
place.
more laid back as well.
Yeah, well, you feel your smaller place in the grand scheme of things, and you know, ironically, you become less important in a way, which is a nice thing.
I guess it's a self-realisation, isn't it? That you can only
you become
change
part of the
so
web
much.
of life. You just become part, and you become part of the times you live in. You know, it's okay. So we might live in times of great destruction, but okay, you know, hey ho, you know, there've been, you know, it's not always like this, and it probably won't be like this again at some point in the future. But you're not so desperate to try. It's easier just to, you know, it's easier to make yourself a good life in the middle of it all and not be quite so bothered. It doesn't mean that you don't ever have things that upset you or anything like that, but it's just in a bigger context.
So we're talking about earthing,
Yeah.
which moves on to positive minds, and changing your diet.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, when you start to rebuild your neural system, it's easier to get access to all this, you know, enhanced mind that isn't your own. So it's an odd one, because in one way, all these things don't bother you so much, but actually you're better equipped to do something about it. You know, it's just more in context, you know.
So you're calmer.
Yeah. Yeah,
And you can handle life better.
yes. It may be that you end up, you know, because you feel so much, you make different decisions about how you want to live. You know, because you'll start feeling things. But there's nothing wrong with feeling things. It improves your sensory apparatus, so you can be aware of things. It doesn't mean you don't become necessarily sensitive as in you can't deal with things, that kind of sensitive, but you're more aware of things. You know, you can feel a tree. You can feel the difference between a tree being over there or a lump of concrete being there. You can actually literally feel it.
You're more at
and
one
that
with
sounds
nature.
like paranormal, but actually it's our natural state. Yeah.
So yes, you feel more in tune.
Exactly.
And thank you again for watching, and look forward to seeing you again on episode 3. Thank you.